Welcome once again to the Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my co-hosts Astrid Bennett Gutierrez from Hispanics for Life and Janet Miranda from Priests for Life, the Defending Life program, seen right here on EWTN. And of course, she's also the co-founder of the Silent No More awareness campaign for women and men who are post-abortive. She does such great work, both of you do in the pro-life movement and elsewhere. Isn't it interesting, ladies, that despite the fact that our culture is trying to tell women, and especially younger girls, that there's no such thing as a Prince Charming and don't sit around and wait for Mr. Right, that young girls and even women are still drawn to that idea of a Prince Charming. Right. That's why we see so many reality shows such as Say Yes to the Dress, and it's all about, you know, getting up all dressed up and looking like that princess on their wedding day. Or even, and I had this experience last year when I took my grandniece to see one of the Disney on Ice shows with all the different princesses that were, you know, lined up and performing and whatnot. And all the girls were dressed like princesses.
But I just saw even that new Disney movie, The Cinderella, where it was like people.
Which is a beautiful film.
It was beautiful.
Yes.
I was watching, I was so touched, and it had such a beautiful sentiment, and everyone in the audience was getting all teary. It's like...
And feminists criticized that movie.
I know, but you see, what that movie does is it taps into our true self. What our heart is really yearning for is to be that princess.
Because that's the way we're designed.
That's how we were designed. That's how God made us, to be the princesses, the daughter of the king, as we always say on this program. So, you know, it's worth it waiting for Prince Charming, because if you go down the other road of sleeping around, there's all kinds of hazards that are going to hit you. And recently, you know, I had a chance to talk to Pam Stenzel. I know, Teresa, you know her quite well. She was in New Jersey speaking in my diocese, Metuchen, and I asked her to stop by and ask her a few questions about, okay, why should we mate to Prince Charming? What are the pitfalls? What are the dangers? What can happen to us? So let's see what Pam had to say.
Okay.
You know, so many kids think that the worst thing that could happen to them is pregnancy. We've kind of created a thing where pregnancy has become the worst thing. And the reality is these girls would come into our pregnancy clinics for a pregnancy test. It's negative. She's ready to bolt out my door. And I have to look at her and say, wait a minute, have you been tested for syphilis, gonorrhea, herpes, chlamydia, trichomonas, vulvodynia, arthritis, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HPV, HIV? And she's like, me? Why would I need to be tested for that? This girl's in our clinic thinking she could be pregnant and does not think she could have an STD. 1 in 4 of our teenagers today is infected. How in the world do they really think that they can have multiple partner sex without becoming exposed to an STD? In fact, the Department of Health and Human Services, the sex ed curriculum coming out of DHHS now says everybody gets an STD. Everybody gets it. It's a common cold. If you're having sex, you're going to get it. And the problem is teenagers somehow think that's everyone except them. What our girls have to understand is that she has everything to lose. The boys have very little to lose. When it comes to sexually transmitted infections, of the 30 major STIs that we're dealing with today, 26 of them primarily damage women. The other 4 damage both. And girls don't understand that the choices they're making when it comes to sex can affect their fertility years down the line. So what they did at 15 is affecting them at 27, 28, 29. We'd have girls in their late 20s going, I'd like to start my family now. I'm married, I finished college, finally found a good guy, done with all the messing around I did when I was a teenager. Now I want to be a mom. They try, can't get pregnant. They go running to the doctor. He says, my goodness, you've got all this scar tissue in your fallopian tubes, your ovaries, your uterus. You have pelvic inflammatory disease, PID. You had chlamydia when you were a teenager. Like, what? I had an STI? How could I have had that STI? I didn't even know. It's too late. It's too late. If our girls could understand that the decision they make on prom night could affect them for the rest of their lives, I think they would make different choices when they fully understand the impact of and the consequences of the choice that they're making. One of the most important things that we must teach our sons, and I have 2, is empathy. Walking in someone else's shoes, the ability to say, you know what, I might be able to walk away from this relationship without permanent damage, but you won't. And for them to understand that they need to treat every girl with respect. I tease kids when I speak and say that I taught my sons to respect women. If they don't, I'll kill them. That was their option. So I wanted to make sure that I raised sons who treated women, all women and young girls, with the respect that they deserved. And I always tell students, your husband, girls, is going to prom with someone else. What do you want them doing? Guys, your future wife is probably going to prom with another guy. What do you want him doing with your wife? The reality for our kids that even if they're 16 and 17, that their future spouse is probably out there somewhere making the same choices, and the choices that they make will affect them. I had a young mother stop me at a conference. It was just devastating. Wanted to talk to me. She was almost shaking, and wanted it private. I had to work out a time to meet with her the next morning. The next morning at breakfast, she told me that she was a virgin when she got married, and her husband, who was a youth minister, was not. And I stopped her and said, "Did you know?" And she said, "Yeah, I knew that he was not a virgin." And they got married, and 2 years into the marriage, she got pregnant. And as typically happens with the HPV infection, the HPV virus, it was dormant in him, silent until her pregnancy. Her pregnancy kicked in HPV, and she ended up with warts, condyloma, all over her genital area. She had to have it burned off. At least, she said, 5 times during the pregnancy. She had a C-section to make sure she didn't infect her child. And this young wife was sitting across that table from me going, "I am so angry and so bitter and so hurt. I did the right thing, and I'm the one paying the price. I don't even know if I can stay married to him." And I had to look at this young wife and say, "You knew. And maybe you didn't know this would be the end result, but you knew. And you said, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, till death do you part. And your little boy needs his father. So you're going to need to get some counseling, sit with your priest, find a way to forgive and to heal this marriage." You know, and I never talked to the youth minister, her husband, but I wondered for so long after that, what could I have said to that young man when he was 17, that he could realize the choices that he was making at 17 would almost end his marriage because he was going to take that HPV virus into his marriage with him.
Wow.
Very powerful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wish you could sit every young girl and young boy just to watch that clip, you know? I mean, because to me, it's like, if that doesn't scare you about sleeping around, then nothing else will, you know?
Isn't it interesting, and this is something I mentioned in some of our previous episodes, the great work of Dr. Miriam Grossman, who was a psychologist at UCLA and really was exposed to just what Pam is talking about when she was counseling young girls. Isn't it interesting that the way we are designed as women, and Pam stressed this, and she didn't mention anything about, in that particular soundbite, she didn't mention religion, but the way we're designed is we're the ones who get more affected by this over-sexualized culture physically and emotionally than the men. And this, to me, goes back right to, I think, this whole thing of attack on women, who we are because of what we represent.
Exactly, and we have a bigger price to pay, but also how beautiful when a man seeks to protect, to honor someone who is so precious, who is a princess. That is her dignity. A woman who sees herself that way will not settle for less. But how many of our young women are being told how precious they are? And unfortunately, many women grow up without their fathers or a poor relationship, somebody telling them, "You're beautiful, you're worth more." Very few women do. And how wonderful that a woman does have that affirmation when they're young, because they're not out there looking for it and trying to pick up the crumbs from whoever will give them a little bit of affection, and then look at the price they have to pay.
And we finally get a lovely movie like Cinderella that comes out earlier this year that really is got a Christian theme to it, underlying theme to it. Father Robert Barham was on my show talking about that. And it gets criticized by by radical feminists. They are so afraid of being who they are. Women, you know, desiring a man who's going to treat them like a princess.
And if you notice what Pam said, like, you know, she taught her sons to be a certain way or she would kill them. But then look at that other example she gave, that couple that got married. I mean, this is really a real lesson here that young ladies, you should be only dating a guy who also wants to be chaste. Like, if you're trying to be chaste, well, you don't want to eventually end up with someone who's been sleeping around.
Right.
Because look what happened to that couple. It could happen to you. And it's almost like Pam was saying, you knew that the person you married was not chaste, did not take a promise to chastity.
Yeah, and it's getting worse,
problem.
and it's getting worse and worse. Like, there's a study at UC Berkeley where 1 out of 2 university students that were sexually active had HPV virus. 1 out of 2, one college campus. I mean, it's prevalent. But I would also say that not only pointing out the negative, because sometimes the negative goes like this. The young people think they're invincible.
It's never going to happen to me.
Right.
You show them
Not
stats.
me.
But
Right.
also, I think that young people do respond to an ideal. They respond to something they can strive for. If you give them a vision of what they can attain, and then they begin to think about their future spouse if they're called to marriage and qualities he might have, that they have to be that person that deserves that kind of a young man. I think that's something we can teach
Well,
them.
you know, speaking of striving to something better, I had able to sit down with Leslie Unruh, and she's the head of the Abstinence Clearinghouse.
She's been doing this for years.
Doing this
her
for
work.
years.
Yeah.
And they have some great ideas of some practical things that we can make chastity fun and educational.
Speaking of positives,
Some
right?
positives, right? So let's see what Leslie had to say about what they're doing out where she is in the Dakotas.
It has been a big thrill for me to be able to bring my work with pregnancy centers and to bring it from really a perspective of what do you do with the negative test? When that girl comes into your center, how do you keep her from coming back the next month? And so what we have done is we've done some programs for the parents and the girls and also now the boys as well, where we help them learn about purity, abstinence until marriage, and we have programs that have just been wonderful, and they've been growing and growing. And what it does is it puts the parent as the primary sex educator of their child, not the school and not Planned Parenthood and others. And so what we've done is we've done the God Mom and Me teas, and that's for girls that are 9 to 12 years of age, and they have a tea party, they dress up, they have all the pretty linens and all the pretty little cupcakes, and then we have a little book that they go through with their mom privately before the tea, and then when they come to the tea, it's a celebration of their fertility and looking forward to being moms and looking forward to that day when they will become married. And so we plant that into their mind at that age between 9 and 12, and we talk to them about what's good to look at and modesty and how to dress, and what we're doing is we're training the moms. And then we also have, because there's so many moms that say, well, I have a son, what do I do about that? So what we did with that is we had father-son timeouts. And of course, that was hamburgers and french fries and lots of denim and a lot of fun for the dads, and talk about being a warrior and honor and chivalry. And then, of course, it progressed because once they become 12 years of age, moms come back to us and say, oh, but what's happening at school? They are in movies and they're being bombarded with all of this negative information, and we want to do something else. What can we do? So really the greatest thing that I think is sweeping not just the United States but all over the world, and that is purity balls. And it's probably my favorite thing that we do. And we see dads dress up and wear tux, and daughters dress up and look forward to these purity balls. And I've now been doing them for many years, and so I've been able to see this transform into something really, really big for the centers as well, because the community doesn't just see them as being the pro-life people, but they see them also as being the prevention people and seeing them doing something to help so the girls don't come into the centers doing a pregnancy test. And so watching these purity balls grow all over the world has been so exciting for us. And of course, then we got bombarded with questions about what about the boys? So then we started the Night to Remember, and that's KNIGHT. And that's when the moms get to go out with the sons. And we see honor, and I tell you, it's just so amazing to see them dress up and have nights there. And it's really one of my favorite things that we see happening. And so that's really what we do as pro-life people. We do the prevention, and then we celebrate. We celebrate fertility. We celebrate that these young women can be wholesome and they can make it to marriage.
What fun ideas.
I know.
And the other thing I was thinking about when Leslie was talking about the purity balls and the Night to Remember and those types of activities and events is, in addition to instilling the values regarding who we are, the human sexuality, fertility, what a relationship bonding event that would be for father, daughter, mother, son.
Well, if you notice too with the tea, even what she said was they get a study book ahead of time, and they work for a month or so, the mother and daughter, with activities in this study book. And so the tea is like the culmination of this work about purity and chastity and modesty and how to dress. When you think about how to dress, oh my goodness, like, do you see how some mothers let their young daughters go out of the house?
Well, part of the problem is the moms aren't dressing modestly either.
That's
and,
right.
And they're thinking
And
this is the way they have to do it.
Exactly.
But getting back to your point, she really just picked up on it, in that we need positive examples, because sometimes as it's important to put those stories out there, as Pam did, but and I think that's really good for our parents who are watching. But as you said, sometimes with the kids, it's not going to happen to me, because that part of their brain, as we mentioned earlier, that recognizes fear isn't fully developed until they're 20. So sometimes they think, well, again, it's not going to happen to me.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break, and we come back. We'll continue our discussion on waiting for Prince Charming. Be right back. So glad you're tuning in to the Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana, and we're having a really good discussion, and we've called this episode Waiting for Prince Charming. Yes, ladies, Prince Charming is out there if that's what God means for you in terms of the sacrament of marriage. And some really good comments from both Pam Stenzel and Leslie Unruh, two ladies who've been at this idea of chastity and helping young people especially save themselves for their princess and their prince. Some really good comments that they said before the break.
A common denominator with both of them is they both worked for a very long period of time in a pregnancy center. Leslie Unruh still does. And really what it is they said, like, you know what, we have to do something on the prevention. And that's the point Leslie Unruh made, is like, okay, we're just not about saying don't have an abortion, but we want to stop them from coming back after they get that negative pregnancy test, which happens sometimes. Let's get them so that they stop sleeping around. And from that, she developed what's called the Abstinence Clearinghouse. And they have great resources, books and all kinds of things. And we'll, of course, at the end of the homework, you go to abstinence.net, which is their website, and you can see how you can get some of those resources. And you can learn how to do the mom teas. And, you don't have to wait for someone else to do it. Moms, you could do this among your girlfriends. You can get the materials and do it yourself. Don't wait for someone else to bring the program to your town.
That's the biggest thing that they're trying to communicate, is the parents' role to be proactive, to really be in their child's life. And in this whole theme about Prince Charming and the girls wanting to be princesses, especially at a very tiny age, they come into the living room twirling their little dress. They want attention. And who's giving them the attention? Does dad spend time delighting in his little girl and giving her that positive attention? So the parents' role is multifaceted. It's not only the educational, but it's also giving them the love that they need, which then will lead them to understand God's love. Ultimately, who is our Prince Charming? The ultimate that we want is Jesus. Our soul wants Jesus. So everything is pointing towards that.
I was telling you at the beginning of this episode that I took my niece along with my grandniece to see one of the Disney on Ice shows, and I was noticing when we walked in that all the girls, not every single one, but the majority of the younger girls, the little kids, the toddlers, and I'd say up to about 6 or 7 years old, were dressed in some sort of a princess getup, whether it was Snow White, whether it was one of the other characters from Cinderella, or one of the other famous characters from the movies that are out now, the newer ones. And the boys were dressed up like pirates and knights. And I'm thinking, okay, some of this has to be from Madison Avenue. I get that. But that desire to dress like a princess or a prince or someone, a man in a chivalrous way, that goes back to who we are and the natural design that we can't ignore. I mean, I truly believe that.
Well, we have some quotes, too, from the saints who actually give us this inspiration. I have one here I'd like to read for everyone from St. John Bosco.
I love St. John Bosco.
And you were just...
I was
recently?
in Turin, and I went to his tomb. And this is a great voice because he worked with youth so closely.
Yeah. That's right. And this is a quote: "Holy purity, the queen of virtues, the angelic virtue, is a jewel so precious that those who possess it become like the angels of God in heaven, even though clothed in mortal flesh."
Wow, beautiful, isn't it?
And I have another one from St. Peter Julian Amard. It's, "We must be pure. I do not speak merely of the purity of the senses. We must observe great purity in our will, in our intentions, and in all of our actions."
That's right. Well, and of course, Teresa, I was over in Rome once again, just like you. And one of the things I did was I asked our good friend Joffrey, who works for Priest for Life over there, to are there any young ladies over here studying from the States that I could talk to about who are embracing chastity? Now, these are young ladies who are already, in their mid-20s. They've made it through their teenage, still chaste, pure, and I'd just like to hear from them. What inspires them? What helps them to continue to look for Prince Charming but live that chaste life? So her name is Leslie Knopf, and she's from Kentucky, and she's a graduate student over in Rome. So let's see what she had to say.
One of my favorite parts of living as a woman in the church is being able to see the complementarity between men and women. I went to work in the church, and it's a really beautiful experience to work with men and with women, in knowing that our specific strengths complement each other. It's something that the church recognizes and really tries to play up. So in terms of being a young Catholic woman, sometimes people see that as a challenge in terms of the secular world, but I think it actually leads to greater freedom, a greater beauty in life, and it also really helps me recognize my relationship with the Lord, how He created me to be, and then as a result, how I live out my life in that way. My favorite church document is Mulieris Dignitatem, which was written by John Paul II, St. John Paul II, because he explains how the dignity of woman is found in how she is different. So many times today, women hear that they have to be more, they have to be stronger like men, they have to take the lead in everything, and they have to be more like men to be respected as women. But what this document tells us is that women are actually their strongest and their best when they live out their femininity. And John Paul II was so wise in this, because it's very countercultural to what women are told today, and living that out is a really beautiful experience. Being a young Catholic woman wanting to live a chaste life until marriage and entering the dating world sometimes is a hard balance, in the sense that it kind of narrows the field for who I'm willing to date, because in being clear on staying chaste until marriage, not many people today are actually willing to negotiate about that from the beginning, and it's something that I won't negotiate on. So in that sense, it's harder, but it actually makes the process much less painful, because I know in the people I date, they actually have my best interest in mind. So it takes away the difficulty in terms of actually finding a genuine relationship, but it does narrow the field, and in a sense that's good, because it weeds out a lot of possibly very bad situations. For women who are really pulled into the secular lifestyle or tempted by that, I would say that it doesn't actually offer you freedom. You are a gift, and what you have to give others is a gift that can never be repeated, and that's meant for one person, and it brings you freedom and love. So living out your femininity, your womanhood in any other way is actually just harming you. And it might be hard to go against what the culture is saying, but in the end it's worth it. And it actually brings a deeper joy than what we could ever know and what the world has to offer.
Oh, good for her.
Isn't she?
And she's joyful,
Young
and
lady.
she's lovely,
Yes.
and she's just filled with the Holy Spirit and Christ. And she's like, you know what? I'm not negotiating on this.
That's right.
Not going
Standing
there.
strong. And I met not just her, but there were several other young ladies. They were all studying together, and they all are like on the same page,
Supporting each
other. And they, like she said, I won't negotiate, and I won't even go out with that
And
kind
she
of a
knows
guy.
that guy that she's going out with, who knows that she's, living chastity, is going to have her best interests in mind.
And that's what she
a beautiful
said,
assurance.
And like she said, it's not easy, and that's what I want people to understand. It's not like a piece of cake, 1, 2, 3. But when you make that decision, God will give you the strength you
Right,
need.
right.
He will. He'll be there with you
And
to
it
walk that
also,
walk.
Jesus tells us in John 10:10, I have come to give you life and abundantly. And he wants us to have complete joy. And she is obviously very
She
happy.
exudes that
So he's
joy.
going to give you the joy and give you the courage and the strength that you need. And you're going to be a lot happier by following his way, because that's
right.
the only way that you're really going to be fulfilled, is to do what God wants you to do and what he's designed you to do.
That's right.
And that's not to sleep around. Only 2 minutes left. Can you believe it? Wow.
I know.
Just flew by. You want to go with the homework, Janet?
Homework. Well, I just want to again remind everyone of our Kitchen Madonna, who's our inspiration for this show, and
especially the new one.
the
which
new one
the
is bronze. I
Yeah.
love it. It's nice and heavy. It's beautiful. Religious Catalog is where you can obtain her. And hey, that's a nice gift to give a young lady, for her, if she's away
reminder.
at college,
Right.
for her dorm room. This might remind her about
The
purity.
broom is a symbol of purity.
That's
of
right.
cleanliness.
That's right. And of course, for the homework, we want you to visit the Abstinence Clearinghouse, their website, which has, like we said, so many resources. It's abstinence.net. Of course, visit our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, where we will have discussion questions for you. And of course, you can subscribe to our monthly e-letter. And then, Teresa, I just want to remind everyone about your book, Extreme Makeover, which is
Right.
available at the Religious Catalog.
Yeah,
There's
I have a
specific
big chapter in there called Jesus, Our Greatest Fan, Our Biggest Liberator, where I go through a lot of these issues. And also with the contraception, deception, I address chastity, and I address what the church says versus what the world says. She was saying, being pulled into the secular world and
That's right.
how difficult it is to stand up. But I've got a lot of information in Extreme Makeover, Women Transformed by Christ, not for the culture.
That's
Not
right.
by the culture. So great discussion, ladies. And remember, there could be a Prince Charming out there for you. You're worth the wait. And quite frankly, so is he. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us. And again, as Janet said, don't forget to go to our website, which is thecatholicviewforwomen.com. On behalf of Astrid and Janet, I'm Teresa Tomeo, and we will see you next time. Enjoy the Catholic View.